Welcome to The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabanzo. This is my podcast. How are you? Where are you? What are you wearing? How's your weather? Mine is good. I hope yours is too. If you're an independent musician who's ever wondered whether physical products, vinyl, CDs, cassettes actually make financial sense in 2026, this conversation is for you. My guest is Thom Skarzynski, founder of Happiness Marketing, a physical-first music strategy consultancy. Thom spent 20 years climbing through the major label system, radio promotion, product management at Fueled by Ramen and Epic Records, Spotify's artist management team, and eventually running sales at Epic before becoming VP of Marketing and Revenue Strategy at Atlantic Music Group. At Atlantic, he worked on campaigns that proved something the industry had been overlooking. Artists with loyal fan bases, the kind who sell out venues night after night, were leaving massive revenue on the table by treating physical products as an afterthought. Case in point, 21 Pilots' 2024 album, Clancy, streaming alone would have generated about 28,000 equivalent album units in its first week. The campaign Thom helped build delivered 143,000 total units, and the album went gold. The following year, their album Breach moved nearly 170,000 physical units out of 200,000 total first week sales. Those aren't major label budgets creating magic. They're strategic decisions about format, packaging, pricing, and fan psychology that translates into independent scale. In this episode, Thom breaks down the economics of physical products for indie artists, the mistakes that kill profitability, and why he believes 2026 is the year physical stops being a sideshow and becomes a core revenue channel for artists willing to treat it seriously. We talk forecasting demand, managing manufacturing risk, designing products fans actually want to own, and why shipping your album in a generic mailer without a personal touch is leaving money and loyalty on the table, and more. If you've ever felt like streaming isn't enough but weren't sure what else to build, this conversation will give you a framework. I take a lot of notes from conversations like this one. I use those notes to help me research and sometimes have follow-up off-mic conversations to develop actionable frameworks that you can use in your creative endeavors. The idea is to help you build a sustainable creative career in music and other creative disciplines. I write about all of this in a bi-weekly newsletter called Liner Notes. You can sign up for this free newsletter at unstarvingmusician.com/liner notes. There's a premium version I call Liner Notes Insider, but for most, the free version is a helpful resource. Try it out. You can unsubscribe at any time. Again, visit unstarvingmusician.com/liner notes to sign up. A quick note about my recording with Thom. We got disconnected during our conversation. I did my best to edit and compensate, but if you notice a difference in my guest's audio partway through our conversation, that's what you're hearing. It was one of those unexpected internet things, but out of our control. But it sounds fine, I think. You won't be too annoyed. Now let's get into it. Here is me speaking with Thom Skarzynski of Happiness Marketing. Are you located in New York?
I am in New Jersey. I do have a spot in New York that I'll maybe once or twice a week. When it gets nicer, I'll go more often. But I'm a New Jersey guy, deep Jersey.
Is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, it is. And I will say we live 2 blocks from my in-laws right now, so that's why we're deep Jersey.
That's cool. I understand. So, what was it like growing up there?
You know, I always loved New Jersey. I always felt fortunate because we're so close to New York. I grew up, it was about a 45-minute ride, but my parents would always take me into the city and, we'd see Broadway shows and all of that. A lot of tours will come through, especially now, and
Sure.
they'll only hit New York. It does drive me a little nuts just how many artists play in Brooklyn because I just refuse at this point. I can't take Brooklyn, but Yeah, I mean, very fortunate. It's one of those things that you think back on of what shaped your life to get you to where you are now. And I would never have been in the music industry if I didn't live in New Jersey. You know, I started interning at record labels of different sorts when I was 14 years old. And I was only able to do that because I could take the train to New York and do it. So it was nice. Are you based? Where are you based? I'm sorry, I should know this.
That's okay. I mean, I was laughing, thinking, yeah, they say be where the action is, and arguably, I'm not. But I live in Querétaro, Mexico, which is outside of Mexico City.
Oh, okay, beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, it's
So
nice.
I am guessing you do not have snow covering everything right now like we do in New Jersey.
No, it's sunny. It's our
Yeah.
weather got kind of warm. I thought our winter was over, but we had a bit of a cool snap, I guess, last week. But I'm talking like 3 days
Yeah, what's
in the low.
cool?
Well, this was like low 40s.
Ooh, that is kind of cool though. That's low, you know.
Yeah, especially when you're soft like me. We my wife and I, so we lived in San Jose, California for 17 years together, and then but in 2016 we moved to Panama, so it was like total tropics and humidity and
Oh,
warm, and
nice.
so anytime
Yeah.
I'd go back either to California or to Texas where I'm from, I'd be freezing, indoors even if it was hot outside because everyone's got air conditioning,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and then here it's a little more like San Jose, except it's high desert but as far as temperature, it's a lot like San Jose. But yeah, when it gets cold, I'm pretty I get pretty cold.
When I worked at Epic Records, I was traveling to California every other week, and my wife and I lived up in North Jersey, so I could go into the city, and she was just alone most of the time. And then when we had our first child, like she didn't want to be alone all the time. So, you know, coming down here I can put up with the commute, no problem, and she has a support system, so it works out really well.
Sounds like it. So yeah, you mentioned touched on part of your career there, Epic, but you've been in the biz for about 20 years or more.
Yeah, yeah, 20 years. And that's like officially in it. You know, I started when I was 18, 38 right now. Don't know where that time went. I
Kids.
remember counting down. Yes, I remember counting down to my 21st birthday. I don't remember having 17 birthdays after that, but yeah, I started in music. I knew I wanted to be in music, from my first concert, right? Which was Canadian band Our Lady Peace, who I
Great band.
still love. Yo, I have multiple tattoos, devoted to them. But yeah, I saw them on stage and knew I couldn't play an instrument, but desperately wanted to just be a part of the industry. So, first internships were, one was around a festival that was run in New Jersey and helping out with that, and then, going into the city and working with a lot of indie labels and management companies. And eventually, I ended up with an internship with Atlantic Records, which I was very much against. Like, I was like the indie guy, and I ended up just falling in love with it and the whole structure of it and the system. So I started working there 20 years ago and never looked back, I guess. But I know that this podcast is based around independent musicians, and that's completely what I offer now. And I wouldn't say I'm disenfranchised with the label system. I think that there's so much less of a need for artists to be signed to a major. Like the offering is it doesn't contain much of what you need to succeed anymore. And I do think that, changing it's like how a big ship takes a long time to change course. And I think it's going to be a while before they get it completely right. And listen, I've all of my friends are from majors and are still working there, so I don't want to insult majors, but I just I think, independence can do just as well, if not better. I saw firsthand what we offered and how there was very little result often.
Well, I think it speaks to the massive changes that have gone on over the time that you've been in the industry, that you've made such a move and kind of commented on it the way that you just did. I was sitting here thinking as you first started talking about or we were talking about your 20-year career when you mentioned the labels and the independence. I'm thinking in my head, you have seen a lot of interesting changes, and I think you sort of summed it up in that little comment there in a way that it has changed a lot. The offerings changed a lot, and there are a lot of things that people, from what I've gathered, can do on their own. So one last sort of just not goofy, but I guess I sort of icebreaker question or something. But what's the story behind the name? The spelling happiness period space marketing or happiness dot marketing.
I believe it or not, I don't tell many people this because they're not exactly the coolest, but Our Lady Peace had an album and a track called Happiness is Not a Fish That You Can Catch. And I believe the album was Happiness dot 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 is not a fish that you can catch. But that kind of is it. I've always been one to I like a good punctuation, and I do, I have it on my to-do list today to look into just, happiness dot LLC, because I don't think happiness marketing at this point is necessarily the right word for everything that we're offering. And, I also have Happiness Endeavors LLC. I have a few things, but I like keeping it really clean and simple. And I do think that there's something memorable about seeing such a simple word with a period after it and then lowercase letters following it, like indicating just what it is. And I'll be honest, I named the company when I was at my lowest. I had been laid off. I have two kids. I had this thought in mind of what the industry should look like, and experience working with some of the greatest artists I've ever worked with. And it was kind of a sarcastic happiness marketing. Like, you know, in this economy at this time where we're going to be happy, but at the same time now I use it as in my pitches to our artists or management companies, as I want to surround myself with good people, and that's the mantra behind happiness. Is I've seen too much bad, and I don't want to be a part of that anymore.
Well, I like it. I like the obscurity of it, and it makes me think of there's an old stand-up of Daniel Tosh's where he makes fun of himself a little bit because his jokes will just keep digressing down to this really weird, bizarre, niche commentary on something, to where he says that I keep going until the lowest common denominator is reached, and only one person in the room understands what I'm talking about or sees the funny part. Anyway, no, but I like it. It sort of makes me think of underdog kind of things, which I have an appreciation for. So
No, likewise. Yeah.
yeah, I could tell. So for context, so happiness marketing is like a physical first, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's like a physical first music strategy consultancy. Actually, this is from happiness.llc, the URL, which is great, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
That's
helps.
exactly it.
Yeah, and that you guys help artists and managers and label teams turn like real fan demand into chart eligible sales revenue and long-term career momentum, especially when streaming alone isn't enough. Now break that down into layman's terms.
Yeah, it sounds so corporate there. Thanks, ChatGPT, for making me sound professional. What's old is new again. I remember when street teams started going away at major labels, and the focus completely changed to other things. And I remember, I had worked at Fueled by Ramen at the time, and I remember thinking like, gosh, our street team guy, he doesn't stand a chance, like talk about outdated. And nowadays, I feel like with streaming being dominant, I mean, streaming, yes, brings awareness, but it's physical that brings like the human emotional connection to music and to artists. And I look at streaming as a very passive activity. I stream all day, every day. I'm not against it in any way. I worked for Spotify for 2 years, had an interesting time, but I also saw firsthand how many people will buy a vinyl without owning, a record player, but just because it brought a connection to them in the album. And I'm the same way. I mean, I own two copies of Frank Ocean's Blonde. One the regular white version, and one is a black version that doesn't have the E at the end of blonde. And outside of my kids and my wife, well, arguably my wife, that's the most important thing, I am surrounded by. I mean, that was a bad joke about my wife. I shouldn't have, I wish I cut that. But no, I find the physical connection as well. Every time I look at it, it makes me happy. And, I surround myself with, I love Travis Scott. I loved working with him, with his merch is all over my office. I just see, going to a live show can be a religious experience, and getting a fan, a human experience is, I think, what people are craving. And that's what we offer is, part of our campaigns, although we'll never, ever, ever ask an artist to do anything. Like I'll never say I need them to sign 1,000 CDs or something. There was a time where anytime an artist would come into our office, we would, look at the last 20 purchasers from their web store and say, hey, can you give these people a quick phone call to thank them for ordering? And it went such a long way, and nobody does that anymore. And like, do you know how nuts a fan would go if you're ordering from a web store, you clearly care and have an emotional connection. And if I was to get a call right now from, the last artist store that I ordered from, and the singer said, "Thanks for doing that," I would be indebted forever. I would be a forever fan. And we used to have, Haley Williams from Paramore doing it, or, whoever it was at the time. And it was just a no-brainer, and you don't see it anymore. So it's physical, but it's also like the human touch is what we're just so much about. And I think that that's the future of the industry, as much as, you know, the very top wants to talk about, streaming and AI and, how it's gonna increase fandom. I don't see how AI can increase fandom or experiences. I think you need the human experience to do that. And that's what we're all about. It took a second to really center ourselves, but now that we're here, we're building, we're building around it.
Well, I agree with what you just said, and I think that a lot of indie artists and certainly people that listen to this can appreciate that. So, speaking of like physical product and from a strategic standpoint, what's your framework for deciding which physical formats to produce or recommend? Kind of walk me through how you would evaluate vinyl versus CDs versus cassettes or whatever for a specific release.
So it obviously depends on the artist and the genre and the time frame, and there's like a million factors that it'll depend on. But in general, I understand that every retailer will ask for, their own vinyl variant and all of that. So there's reasons why the Billie Eilishes of the world, who I adore as well, will have, 15 versions of her album available upon release, or her LP. But for me, I think a great store can be made of, I like to have three versions of an LP available. One that never sells out, one that sells out very quickly, that's very limited, and then one on the in between. And then I like, I enjoy creating items that support the body of work itself. So we do a lot of like journals or zines or whatever you want to call them, which they do contain a CD in them. So when it comes to like if you want to be a chart eligible, it's fully chart eligible, but inside of them you can put, handwritten lyrics, you can put images. Paper-based items are very inexpensive to make, and there's a very quick turnaround for them. So, even an independent artist can do such a thing. I know finding a manufacturer can be a headache, but they all do it, and it's a very quick process. And especially if there's some design skills or whatever it is, I mean, putting it together, as long as it feels like it was curated by the artist, which it should be, it's consistently a bestseller, what I've seen. I think that there's a place for CDs, but a little less so. Cassettes have always been in the US the lowest seller, no matter what project I work, no matter how cool we make them. There's been times we've added in, Polaroids into the cassette case and all of this cool stuff, and still the last thing to sell out. I just love items that build into the album's universe, because I do think that artists have fans of them, but to be a fan of the latest album is a really tricky thing. A lot of people just like listening to what they already know. So if you can offer something that brings them into the world of whatever the latest release is, I think the value of that is immeasurable.
Sure. I had an artist from England in the last few years send me, I mean, she completely DIY'd it, but she had like a little, I guess, zine in it and like hand done art
So
and
cool,
with the
right?
CD. Yeah, I still have it, and it's great. It's so funny too. When we moved to Mexico, we bought this 2016 Nissan X Trail in nice condition. It was at the end of the pandemic, and used cars were very expensive. Blah blah blah. But
Hmm.
it has a CD player in it, and and so she'd sent me a CD. So I'm like, I'm gonna play it in there. Well, it's the only CD that's ever gone in there because it won't come out.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, it's like, well, if I was gonna get one stuck in there, this is a good one. So.
You know what's funny though is, so I worked with an artist when I was with Fueled by Ramen and Roadrunner, A Day to Remember, who they've been around for a couple of decades now, and we decided to go physical first with their latest album, and we still did a proper, streaming rollout. Every couple of weeks we released a song or two, and eventually I think we waited 5 weeks before we put the full album on, all DSPs, Spotify and Apple Music and all of that. But our announcement was, here's the album. It's available today. We coordinated it with indie stores and whoever was carrying it, that they'd put it on the shelves immediately. I think it was a Tuesday that we did it, to kind of honor, as a throwback to when albums were released on Tuesdays. And the band posted an announcement that said, go to your record store, go to our website, everything's, available and shipping immediately. And not only was the response extremely successful, from a sales perspective, but reading the comments from fans of like, man, listening to an album in my car for the first time in, 10 years or whatever is such a great experience, and all of these comments. And you remember that there is an entire part of the country that, their cars do still have CD players, and or something, like not everyone is on the coasts and has the latest, MacBook and whatever it is. And it was a great experience, and we still did do the Spotify rollout, and that was completely fine. Rock acts typically don't do extremely well on streaming anyway, so we weren't very nervous about being penalized, for going physical first, because we didn't have high expectations for our streaming campaign anyway. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great, campaign with an artist that made an album that they wanted to, it to be listened to from start to finish. So it was a cool experience. It reminded me of just going home and putting on a CD and being like, wow, like this is good. Or the opposite sometimes.
Right. I know when we used to actually sit and listen to music. I've been thinking about um, this specific time I was listening to music when I was very young. These two uh, girlfriends of mine came over to my parents' house where I lived, and we were listening to the then still somewhat new "Some Girls" album by the Rolling Stones, and maybe some other stuff. But I just can remember us like sitting there and listening to it and talking about the songs and stuff, and it's just like such a pastime of history.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, some of my favorite albums of all time, I'll never forget like sitting in my room and listening to and studying the lyrics and the liner notes and all of it. And it was such an experience. And, like they're albums that stick with me to this day that and take me back to, my childhood bedroom of like, man, I'll never forget the first time I heard, this album. It was, I wasn't sure about buying it at the record store. And then when I got home, it was just, next level. And you don't get that anymore. I mean, I guess with streaming, you can, but it's just there's so many other distractions that I don't think you do. I always think of it as such a passive kind of listen. Anytime I listen to an album on streaming, there are entire songs that have to go back to and say like, I don't remember that one, and it's just a different experience.
Yeah, the deliveries makes it too easy to be doing something while you're listening. So,
Exactly. I mean, it's not the streaming platform's fault that, that you can also have your phone out and, you're watching a YouTube video while you're listening to this and you're answering text messages and there's too much going on and it's another reason why when we happiness marketing does our launches, we try to get the emotional connection because we know it aids in people spending time with the album. And a big thing we do too is, with indie record stores, the listening events, which I know have become super popular and everybody's doing them now. But talk about a time like, when you can get a fan base together where the artist isn't there, but everybody's listening for the first time and reacting, in real time and sharing a pulse and hearing the words and it's just like it's so rare and you don't get that experience often. And I'm happy, it's funny. I did two interviews over the last couple of weeks with people that have been reporting about the album listening party because apparently it's the new sensation. But both of the interviewers said they were going to the listening party and it was going to be their first time ever in a record store. And
wow.
it's like, yeah, I thought that same wow to myself of like, the smell of a record store, the experience of being there, of seeing things and, it reminding you of albums and, like, I mean, gosh, like it's just, there's so many benefits to it. And I like, once again, it's like everything old is becoming new again. People want the physical experience of being in a place and like experiencing something. And, I read an article about how shopping malls are making a comeback because, kids don't want to order everything online. And, while I may not share that same sentiment, if I could never leave my house again, and especially for Christmas shopping, what a nightmare that used to be. But like, I get it, right? I mean, have spent a generation, doing everything virtually, and now it's unique to go and try clothes on and look in a store and flip through things, and it's just it translates across music, across fashion, across every bit of consumer behavior.
That's nice to hear. So we were talking about like booklets, journals, zines.
Yeah, yeah.
I read an interview of yours recently Music Business Worldwide, I think, was the
Yeah.
publication, and it mentions like creating a book or a memento, something meaningful for the fans, and packaged like with a vinyl or CD. How do you decide what the additional components should be when you look at something like this, and what makes that work at like the 21 Pilots scale versus the smaller independent artist scale?
21 Pilots are a machine, right? I mean, their designer is incredible. Their management team are, the truest partners I've ever worked with. I almost like feel a insecurity speaking about them because, they were so involved in every single phone call and email that, it was a different level of what goes into the journal or zine there. But with other artists that I've done it with, oftentimes we just slide a CD in because it keeps it inexpensive enough for the fans, and it doesn't really take away from the experience. And then the content of it, when I have to suggest things, that's always the hardest part. But I'm working with an artist now that it's like, can you please just have the singer handwrite the lyrics to the songs? And if you have any studio photos, and we can get a designer to, mock it up, and it'll just be, 24 pages. We can, make it cool. We can sell it for an inexpensive price. And, it just, we want to bring people into the world of this album. And then after we received all of that, working with the manufacturers, and I have a really great one that's my secret weapon, but she will do things like say, do you want to emboss or deboss the cover, and we'll foil stamp this, and we'll raise the text on this so it feels super cool, and like all of these extra features that you can do that again are like not very expensive because they're paper based, and there's stuff that will die cut that make it very cool, or you can add glitter, or there's so many like things you can add to make it unique. And for me, that's the key to doing it properly, is whatever your vision for the album is, create a piece that represents it. And there's mainstream artists that have done it wonderful. Olivia Rodrigo, when she released Guts, did it's one of the most beautiful, I'm gonna just call it a book, but zines or journal, whatever, that I've ever seen. And it's die cut into a star, and it has glitter on it, and it's glossy, and it's just like it represents the album so well. And I don't remember what price point that she sold it at, but whatever it is, it's like it feels like real value when you're holding something like that in your hands. And it's really, I have to stress, it's not a very expensive endeavor. Most manufacturers can do it for, the cost of goods. I don't want to make any promises. It depends on the manufacturer, but under $4 a piece, or under $5 a piece. And the normal price point for something like that will range from anywhere from, you could sell it from $15 to $45. I've seen like
Mm-hmm.
there's so much flexibility in there based on where you're at in your career, and what's gone into it. And for me, it's a companion piece, right? It's something that while someone's listening to the album, they can be flipping through, and they get a little view into their favorite artists and their life and all that. And I love stuff like that.
Yeah, the super fan does clearly. Is there? I'm wondering if there is some inspiration from your youth, whether it was music or something else, that makes you look at the physical the way that you do, and maybe it's just been working with secret weapon manufacturers or something that's really opened your eyes. But is there something from when you were younger that you can pinpoint as an inspiration? Like, did you collect comic books or something?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. I didn't. I wasn't really a big collector. even vinyl, I went through a phase where I did, but I think having worked in marketing and sales at music companies, I think when things started drying up, right? When terrestrial radio stopped moving the needle for artists. And then when Spotify's editorial playlists meant less than they used to, and when TikTok stopped breaking artists in the way that it used to, and all of it, when music videos became less important to the experience, and you go through every department, right? And when late night TV didn't stopped meaning you were going to sell records or stream anymore, and looking at the data, and it became a case of just like, well, what am I supposed to do, right? I'd enter every album campaign wanting it to be successful, but also realizing that nobody knows how to make something successful. And I realized that when it comes to streaming, because of the economics of what Billboard counts as an album equivalent is nearly 1,500 streams. No one person can do that on their own, and especially in release week. So for me, it's let's go back to physical. Let's start creating items that are one to one again. And it's not all about the chart, but I realized with rock bands, especially, whether it was Coldplay or 21 Pilots, but just we couldn't depend on streaming to help us make a statement, but we did have the power to do it through physical items, and that was really it. I mean, even as we speak, and I'm unsure when this will air, but Mumford and Sons released an album recently that landed in the top 10, and it was it sold, I want to say something like 42,000 equivalents, but they're one of the biggest artists in the entire world, especially
Hmm.
from a touring perspective, and that includes the US. And it's just like it's seeing Imagine Dragons, do, I believe it was 28,000 first week, and Glass Animals the same, and all of these like humongous acts, and streaming just wasn't working for certain genres. And I just couldn't accept that, like, okay, well, I guess we'll just, this album just, yeah, won't make the noise or won't get noticed the same way because people just aren't caring about, rock on the rock playlist as much as they care about other ones, and just not wanting to accept that, and seeing fandom and testing things out. And, I think it's so many companies focus on the super fan, and so, the super fan is wildly important, but I think that turning a casual fan into a super fan is the real key to like a sustainable career. Is, how do you make the normal fan, the one that listens to you occasionally, how do you give them an experience that they're going to be a fan for life? And it's not that difficult when it all boils down. It's really just a human touch.
It's amazing. It's like saving rock when it mostly
I
needs
mean, that's
saving one memento
that's
at a
the
time.
goal,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
It's so funny. I
I've,
just published two newsletters talking from slightly different perspectives about niche marketing for certain. Like sometimes an artist has stuff that sits okay on streaming, and sometimes they have stuff, the same artist, that doesn't. And so anyway,
yeah,
I've been writing about addressing the niche market and how much physical product can come into play, and like the time spent trying to be on playlists versus the time spent to put together a physical product campaign, and the dollars and all that stuff,
yeah,
the
yeah.
revenue difference. It's pretty incredible actually when you look at it.
Yeah, it is. And the algorithm is really taking over, especially at Spotify, where people want to listen to things that, you know The algorithm is feeding them. It's the days of, if you got on today's top hits, which is remains their biggest playlist, but it used to be life changing for artists where like, oh my God, that we are now going to stream an insane amount. And it's changed. I mean, the play editorial playlists have decreased in listenership and streams, and it's the algorithm that people want. And I'm the same way. I normally just want to hear things that I already know I like and I can sing along to. And when my algorithm hits the right way and reminds me of songs, and there's no better feeling for me, right? And it's like, well, then how do you break a new artist or a new album, or as an independent artist, how do you get the attention if people only want to hear stuff that they already know and like, or know they're going to be inclined to like, and it just frustrated me to no end that we just didn't stand a chance. And I think it's only going to get worse with apps like Suno and AI music. you know I think I read that Suno was uploading something like 60,000 new songs a day to, I think it was to Deezer in France or something. It was a very obscure kind of number like that to an obscure platform, but it's only going to keep, snowballing. And like in the short term, major labels and whoever are gonna license their music to these AI apps, and they'll have profit from that, and it'll be great and all of that. But I think the long term is based in physical, and is based in building fandom, and is based in you know allowing people to stream it to when they want to hear it, but also feel a piece of ownership. And touring and merchandise and all that stuff will always be the most important, but I think just as important now is offering, a product that represents, your body of work.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and I'm someone that, again, I worked at Spotify for 2 years, and it was a very different time. It was, when Taylor Swift was, off the platform, and we were fighting for, Apple Music was getting exclusives from artists, and there wasn't parity, and it was a very different time, and it feels like forever ago. It was a decade ago, I guess, at this point, but I have nothing but respect for my friends who work at the platforms. I just don't think it's the same. I think, consumers change, fans change, they want what they want. And, I'm the same way. I want to listen to the albums I know I love already. It takes me a long time to get through a new album, and it's if anything can help that along and make the experience better for me, I'm all on board for it.
Yeah, I can relate. So, in that interview article that I mentioned, you'd also talked about the direct to fan or direct to consumer
Yeah.
shift from being like a transactional layer to being an operating system for fandom. So, what does that mean practically? So, like, in other words, what does operating system for fandom actually mean for an independent artist trying to implement it?
You own every step of your web store. You own the experience that the fans have. You own the messaging. You own the experience of purchasing on there. You own, what happens after someone purchases, and do they get, you can send something in the mail. I mean, you can send them a postcard, or something while they're waiting for their product. You own the experience of when they get what they ordered in the mail, if there's anything else in there. I mean, if Taylor Swift can put confetti in her, 500,000 first week, box sets, there's no reason why, you can't add a personal touch into the box when somebody buys something. And that for me is like it's you completely own the experience, and it's only limited by how creative you can get with it. If you want to, if you want to call customers, like I mentioned earlier, or if, include something handwritten for a few, or I've seen artists, use Polaroid cameras and include custom Polaroids in, like, one of a kind Polaroids in packages, and fans that receive it, they talk to each other, and there's no better marketing than fan to fan than, it just, it means something. So that's really kind of what I meant by it, is just you own every step of it. Like, when someone goes to check out, y- like, the messaging is yours. And yes, there's best practices of, you can do, what they call an upsell, where it's, well, thanks for putting this in your cart. Do you also want to put this? And, sure, you can do that. Or, you can just include a nice message or a discount on something else. Or, it's like, it's really only limited by, like, how
Your
creative you want to
imagination, right?
get. And yeah, I mean, every step of it you own. And I think that, the people that do it best are the ones who think about the fans. And, a stat that I learned, I mean, I guess a couple of years ago, but the abandoned cart rate on music stores is, like, I believe it was 76% on average, which means like 76% of people are going into a store, finding something they like, putting it into their cart, and then either forgetting about it, or maybe they see the shipping price and they don't like it, or for some reason or another, they're clicking out of it. And if that's the average, and fans are already inclined to bail on purchasing something from your store, then, offering a poor or an impersonal experience on the store is not going to help that at all. And you can message, usually, if you have the email addresses, you can message people and, remind them, hey, you have something in your card. Or, studies were showing that you can do that up to 4 times before fans get turned off by it. But it's also like, why don't you, why don't you try to nail it the first time? And, there are some artists that always do. I mean, I would imagine Tyler, the Creator's abandoned cart rate is, less than 50%. And I've been told that Zach Bryan, is less than 50%. And there's humongous artists that, when they release something, people buy it, and they don't often bail. But for most of it, it's, people want to spend their money wisely, and, have second thoughts about things. And it's just, how do you prevent that? You offer a better experience, a more personal experience.
What mistakes do you see independent artists make early on with, like, with physical products, and what and that you've seen corrected in successful campaigns?
um I mean, it comes down to, if somebody is going to invest in ordering something physical, I really do. It disappoints me anytime I see an independent artist, or major label artist, just ship it in, whatever it is, a padded,
Right.
envelope kind of thing. Yeah, and it just feels thrown together. There's no experience behind it. Sometimes your item is damaged, sometimes it's not, but it's just like, oh, okay, I got this now. And, I think that it's easily fixable. You don't have to handwrite every single letter. You can do one, and you can photocopy it, but include something in there that a fan can, you know, look at alongside their new item. I mean, the best companies that even sell candles do the same thing, right? I mean, it's like, it's very easy to just go the extra step and like put some thought into it, and I understand how overwhelming it can be if you have a lot of, orders and a lot to ship out, but it's also, you can lose a lot by not putting the extra effort in. And that's like 101 for me. Two is just, overpricing. I understand that everybody's hurting for money, and if you can make a little bit more, it sustains you, and people have families. And listen, I get it completely, but the fan is feeling the same. I mean, they're deciding where to spend their money, and if you're charging, $5 more than you need to be, or that most other artists are doing, it's like it's a poor fan experience without anything even going wrong. It's just like, man, I didn't want to pay this much, but I guess that it is what it is. And the last thing I'll throw out there, because I've seen so many artists try this and it drives me nuts. And this isn't a shot at Taylor Swift at all, because I know she did like a version of this, but she did it the right way. But when you make fans order multiple items to, like, create an image, like if you buy these 4 vinyl, you'll get an image, or it turns into this. Like Taylor Swift's, yes, I think it was a clock that for her Midnight's campaign that it turned into, but it wasn't, I don't think her fans felt as poorly about it. But anytime I have to buy extra and I'm not excited about the extra is a problem. Like when I get an upsell and it says, "Do you also want to add this into your cart?" If it's something I think is really interesting, I'm all for it. I'm excited to purchase it and to check out. If I feel like I'm being forced to get something because it unlocks something else, that's a bad experience. And that's also like you feel taken advantage of. And I don't think independent artists intend on that. I think that they look at it as a sales tactic. But, in the long term, you got to think, just like, super fans are always going to, um, that they're going to be the livelihood for your future, and if you're treating them poorly, you're going to lose them, and that makes a big difference.
Sure.
I'm sure you've seen it too. I mean, it's like, it's just there's just certain things that it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, I'm sure they imagine it's cool, but they maybe didn't ask themselves some of the questions that you were posing there, about, well, how's the fan really going to receive this, or, is it as cool as I
Yeah.
think it is, or did they, man, maybe sometimes they're testing it or whatever, and they're just going for it and see
Yeah.
what happens.
And by the way, I remember, oh, I'm sorry. I will say, like, back in the day, Blink 182, when they released Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, I think there were 3 or 4 different versions that had secret songs on them. And it was like, trying to find, all the versions with the secret songs. And I remember as a kid having a lot of fun with that, like, saving up my paycheck so I could buy multiple copies of that album. But like if I got a copy that had different secret songs, like I was so excited about it. So like I understand that, like, it's been done correctly before, even if maybe at the time not everybody was as excited about it as I was. But it just nowadays, especially with streaming, like, don't people can do it, they're paying 14.99 or whatever for their streaming platform. They don't have to purchase on your site. And if you're giving them an ultimatum to buy more to get something, then it's like, you'll see your abandoned cart rate rise pretty quickly.
So we have to think carefully about the add-ons.
Totally, totally. I mean, the whole experience you should just, you know, think carefully about. What are fans going to think when they see this and that and this price and that price, and how are things ordered on the store? Like, what are you presenting first, second, third? Like, the whole thing you just want to curate. based on your own fan base.
Sure. I was thinking that I'm really just asking this in case people who listen to our conversation don't think about it for themselves, or maybe not as deeply as I thought I was as you were talking here in the last few moments. But we should probably think about, like, are there retailers that we found kind of inspirational or sort of inform what we consider to be a great experience? Because some of them do, as you mentioned earlier, they do or they don't do little things that make all the difference, and they might not even be. It's more thinking about your purchasing experience, even and especially beyond music, because a lot of those things apply or can be applied to some of our own projects as independent artists.
Yeah, you're so right. And indie record stores, there's some things somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 in the US, from the latest I read. And, if you can give them, your best variant, or, I mean, for me, that's always, drive people to indie record stores. If you can get your stuff in Target and Walmart and Hot Topic and Urban Outfitters or Barnes and Noble, like, excellent, great, they're not going to care about it as much as the indie record stores will care about it and will treat it. And and I understand too that not every market necessarily has an indie record store, but for me it's like they're the holy grail. I When I go to Target, if even if I go because I want to see if they have a vinyl, I usually end up leaving with a ton of other stuff, and sometimes not the vinyl. When I go to an indie record store, I leave with other stuff, but it's usually what I came for and other music. It's like it's an experience that, I don't know. I always want to just drive people to indies.
Sure, and I would guess that for touring artists, it's worth seeking those places out if they're not in your own neighborhood, because I mean, I've seen artists go places, and there's a demand. It might be small, but there's a demand for the vinyl that they brought, or
Yeah,
the CD, but it wasn't necessarily something that could happen the night of the show. Maybe the fan wasn't there. Maybe the artist didn't anticipate the inventory. But if they can get it in the hands of a store in that market, it might be worth it, because also, there's just the long game of building a fan base in a new market, right?
absolutely. And sometimes the line alone at a merch table or wherever it is turns me off from ordering there. And the first thing I usually do is go online to see if I can just order what I want there. And if I can't, it's like, I have to make the decision of, do I want to wait here for 20 minutes, or do I want to just convince myself that I don't need that item anyway? And yeah, I mean, the last show I went to, I got faced with exactly that problem, and I found that the artist, they're kind of a legacy, punk rock band that I just love, and they didn't have a store, and I ended up reaching out to them on Instagram and was like, if there's any way for me to get that, that green hoodie that you were selling, at the show in Jersey the other night, I'll do whatever. I'll pay whatever you want. It was so cool, but I wasn't able to hop on the line or whatever it was, and they responded back. They're a smaller band at this point, and they were like, what, we just launched our store. It's on there, and yeah, I went on there and I bought a whole bunch of stuff. But it's like it's very true. Like, give people an opportunity to pick up things that they might not be able to in the moment at a show. Plus, like, everybody knows that, like, having to hold an item throughout an entire show is such a pain. And like, people do it, but like, I don't have fun holding a vinyl, like, for an hour and a half while I'm, standing waiting for the band to go on, or, whatever it is. And after the show, the table's always crazy. So, give other opportunities to purchase it, or to find it at least.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the one thing you wish every independent artist understood about physical products before they press their first record?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, I'm gonna go pretty simple on this one, and it's like it's also the most economical thing, but don't bite off more than you can chew. There's something to be said about scarcity and, about something being, the first pressing is, it always flies the fastest. Any artist I've worked with, if we sell a first pressing, people buy that and it sells out, and those fans are so happy. And I think as an independent artist, you can, do the same thing, only you don't have to call it the first pressing. You just know it's your first pressing, and, you want to sell out of it. And once you do, you can decide to order more of it. Or if it's flying, you can always order more. But, you know, I see a lot of artists that, and I work with a lot of artists and artist teams that they're like, we're sitting on 8,000 copies of our latest record because we overordered. And, do you think you can help us with, inventory sell through and things like that? And it's hard. Once the moment's passed, it's not easy. And then people pay. I mean, they've paid for this product already, so you're in the hole, until you sell enough to break even. And a lot of times there'll be, a warehouse or a storage unit that you have to pay for, just to house the products, because, no one is having 8,000 copies of an LP in their own home, or not many people. But, I've seen so often artists over order, and I understand that you get better rates that way, but only take in what you're pretty positive you can sell through, and then that's a good problem to have if you do sell through it.
That's great advice, man.
I mean, I've seen it go wrong way too many times. And I will say, as a quick anecdote, but when I won't say the artist, because I want to be respectful, but when I first started at a recent role that I had, an artist projection was pretty low for the album. And I went into my boss's office at the time, and, I had really put together a strong blueprint for selling physical for them. And I said, I want to make the amount that I named of vinyl was double what the projection was. And that was just for vinyl. I mean, I guess I can give some numbers, but their projection for all in first week was 40,000. And I went in and said, I want to make 80,000 vinyl. And he looked me dead in the eye. And it was someone I've known, since my first job, one of the best people that I've ever worked for. And he just said, you will be fired. Like, if this does not sell through and we're sitting on it, there is no chance of you keeping this job. And this was within,
Dang.
a couple of weeks of me starting at the role that I was, so grateful to have. And, at the time it was like, you know what? I believe in it. Well, so we're going to sell through it. Like, let's go. Like, I need you to, can you please sign off on this? And he did, and we did sell through it. And, we had a great campaign and we got lucky, but it, it's true. Like, if a major label is saying if you over order like that, that's a fireable offense. And, it's not like a common thing, but like, just think about, what you can do.
Yeah, you're reminding me of the the old investing advice. But take the money that you think you can take, in revenue and profitability, and don't lament. That you think you could have
Yeah.
taken more. Move on to the next the next project, and just try to learn. And I would imagine that being conservative for the indie artist definitely can pay off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many tools right now at the disposal of an indie artist, that and there's so many things that you don't need from a major record label, and there's only so much you can control, and that goes for everybody. I spoke with someone powerful in the industry earlier today about a role, and his his best line was, "The one thing I realized is nobody knows what they're doing." And it's like, yes, like I have no idea what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I think that you can play it safe. And if it works, excellent. And if it doesn't, then at least, you're not financially ruined because you went for it too much.
Right. Wow. Okay, so I know that happiness.llc, and then looking for Thom with an H in there, Thom Skarzynski on, I know at least LinkedIn and Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram I'm just THOMS, Tom S. I very luckily got that handle, and I'm holding on to it.
Well, it sounds like you're doing good things, and I encourage people to contact you if they're about the work that you do, if they feel like they're in the right place to do it, and if nothing else, just go read about some of the things that you've done. It's all pretty interesting, some of the bands you've worked with and the career that you've had. And
of course,
I'll put a link to that interview that I mentioned a couple times in here. I thought it was pretty good, and I'll probably go back and reread it because I had to kind of breeze through it pretty quick, trying to get some background for today. But yeah, it looked like good stuff, and I really appreciate your time today. I think this is going to be great information for listeners.
No, I appreciate yours even more. And yes, and any independent artist who's listening to this, feel free to reach out. Like you mentioned, it's just happiness.llc, or find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. And I'm pretty good at getting back to messages. Sometimes it takes me a second, but I get fulfillment out of helping. And I want to be able to help out. And it doesn't necessarily matter to me, how much money you have, or, whatever your situation is. Just reach out and let's talk about your plans and, how we can get there.
That's great. It's good talking with you, man. As an independent podcaster, your support means the world to me. You could even say I depend on it. With that in mind, here are some things you can do to help support us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or shoot me a review by email, robonzo@unstarvingmusician.com, that I can use on the website. Or just share this episode with a friend. This makes a huge impact on our audience growth. You could also visit our crowd sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn of the many other ways of supporting the podcast, including a quick and easy online tip jar. It's like click, tip, done, easy, and super appreciated. You'll find many ways of showing your support there, including through our affiliate partners like Kit, Email, formerly ConvertKit, DreamHost, and others. The music you're hearing is New Gods Part 2, the instrumental mix by yours truly. You can hear the full version, download it, or buy it at robonzo.com. And if all this was too much to remember or process, just go to the show notes for this episode at unstarvingmusician.com to find links to all the stuff talked about in this episode. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. Thanks for listening. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.